but wanted to welcome everybody to our third webinar in our summer series. This one is about military and veterans. MTM is very pleased to host this webinar, and I'm happy to introduce our presenters. Our first presenter is Jessica Perez. She is a travel trainer with MTM. She's based in Jacksonville, Florida. And then also we have Heather Campbell. She is the program manager at Navy Safe Harbor Adaptive Sports. She's also a certified therapeutic recreation specialist. I forgot to mention Jessica Perez is actually an officer in the Army National Guard. I just want to kind of get a few housekeeping things out of the way. If you have any questions for our presenters, at the end there will be some time. Please use the chat feature. In the top right, you'll see a chat feature button if you're on our WebEx online platform. And if you're calling in, we'll go ahead and we'll try to take calls, but if we can use our chat feature first. And if you have any questions, please present them to myself. My name is Nathan Grace. In the chat feature, you'll see you can actually direct them directly to me. Please go ahead and make sure that you direct them to myself. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on MTM's website after the webinar, shortly after. And if you need an accessible version, please let me know. My email is ngrafe, it's N-G-R-A-E-F-F @mtm-inc.net. And please keep in mind that these PowerPoints are available by noon Eastern Time, the day of the webinar, on the same web page that you actually used to sign up for these webinars. I'm also going to paste that in the chat feature so you have that link for future webinars if you'd like to have the PowerPoint ahead of time. All right, and now I'd like to turn this over to Jessica.
Hello, everyone. So next slide, please. Okay, so these are going to be the topics that we're going to be discussing. Today, we're going to go over military members and the differences, the different kinds of veterans, the family members, statistics, the resources available to veterans, military service members, and then we're going to be talking about travel training, internal questions, and then if the audience has any questions. Next slide, please. So we're going to be talking about the different kinds of veterans. So first and primarily is the military. So what makes someone in the military? There is a difference between active duty, reserves, and contractors. So an example of an active duty service member would be they're deployable, they work Monday through Friday, they're stationed at a base or a camp, they get the full benefits, and at any given time they'll be ready to deploy, and that's what they're being trained for. Then there's the reserves like myself, who only participates 1 weekend a month. I go in during the week, and then there's 2 weeks of annual training. They are also deployable at any given time, but the chances of that are very minimal. And then there's contractors who perhaps were in the military before, and then they transition out to get a federal job. And then a veteran is any person who served at any length of time in any military branch. And you can serve during World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan. That you could serve for approximately 2 years. That will still consider you a veteran. So there's really no time limit. As long as you served within the military, you're considered a veteran. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, and then the two main different types of veterans, there's a war veteran and a combat veteran. So a war veteran is any government-issued order of foreign soil or water to participate directly or support against an enemy. That can be you can work at a hospital overseas. That will consider you a war veteran. And a combat veteran is any government-issued who experienced any level of hostility for any duration resulting from offensive, defensive, or friendly fire military action involving an enemy in any foreign theater. The difference between that is you actually see combat, so you can be right in front of the enemy. An example of that would be an infantry. An infantry soldier will most likely see combat whenever they're deployed. Someone that works in a hospital would ideally be a veteran, a war veteran. Those are the two main different kinds of veterans. Next slide. Family members. So for example, my husband is also in the military and he is active duty. So I would be a military spouse. And then military bride are considered the children within that have parents that are, or a parent that are serving the country. And ideally, they would travel to different duty stations within their service, but that's not all the cases because we do have military service members that are in the reserves. Ideally, they would be located at their hometown. They won't really have to relocate to another location. That's mostly more towards active duty. And Heather?
Hey everyone, we're going to talk a little wounded, ill, and injured statistics from 2000 to 2014 with the conflicts that have been going on with Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation New Dawn, and Operation Enduring Freedom. As the chart reflects, those are the service members that were in combat and got wounded, ill, or injured while in combat or on deployment. That does not just include physical injuries, but also post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries from deployment. Next slide. Okay, the primary injuries from 2000 to 2014, obviously brain injury is in the purple, is the most prevalent injury of this war. Post-traumatic stress disorder comes with a close second, and then amputation, and that doesn't mean amputation like a finger or a toe. That is considered major amputations. One limb, and then above 2 limbs, obviously 3 or 4 limbs. Next slide. Okay, just to talk a little bit about the disabilities and illnesses and injuries that we're referring to, post-traumatic stress is common with those who have deployed, and the official definition is a common anxiety disorder that develops after exposure to terrifying events or an ordeal in which grave physical harm occurred or was threatened. And something that we'll touch on a little bit later is about the family members. It is important to note that in a lot of cases, not a lot of cases, but it is possible that a family member of a victim can also develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Obviously, traumatic brain injury, amputations we talked about. Going along with the PTSD is anxiety or mood disorders. And depression. Suicide is at an extremely high rate of service members who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and are coming home. It's almost higher than the amount of injuries that have occurred. Next slide. It's important to note that each of the branches of the service have a resource program for wounded, ill, and injured service members. On the right-hand side of your slide are the names of each organization for each branch. Those organizations don't offer just help with travel, but it's important to know of them because they can help your service member with anything related to education, transitioning, going back to active duty or retiring from the service, anything with their family or caregivers, any sort of support they might need, and as well as adaptive sports, navigating the VA. The options are endless for those organizations, what they do for their service members.
So now we're going to be discussing travel training when it comes to military service members or veterans. One of the fundamental things we need to know about travel training is that we need to understand their needs, backgrounds, and goals. An example would be, have they ever taken the bus before, and if so, where was that located, and what is the difference between that location and the location that they're currently at. We need to assist them by giving them resources Examples of that would be bus schedules, customer service numbers, maps, and apps. You as a travel trainer or an individual that is a travel trainer is also a great source. And as well as being supportive, encouraging them, and providing independence. You don't want to treat them as someone that doesn't know how to read a map or has never seen a bus schedule before. So don't be all over them. Just give them that independence that if they have a question, you'll be there to assist them. But don't make it seem like they don't know anything, because they need to pass some tests. They do know some sort of knowledge when it comes to map reading. And that's going to be the fundamental thing when it comes to travel training veterans, is that most of the veterans that I've trained, they either relocated or just another way to get out in the community. This question is for Heather.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Working with an individual who is in the military or a veteran, what is the proper terminology to remain respectful? Just like when you're working with anyone with a disability, always putting the person before the disability is something that you should always do. With military, as we referenced earlier, the post-traumatic stress disorder, it's important that you know enough about your client to keep them safe, but not pushing too hard. They're not usually ready to share specifics of their experiences in combat right away. So just, when you're talking to them, not to be pushy about what information to get from them. And then lastly, with military, depending on if they're active duty, if they're retired, if they're a veteran, it just depends if they want to be called by their rank or should be called by their rank, and that's something that they'll let you know. Next slide.
Question number 2, what are physical or perceived barriers to an individual who is in the military or a veteran within the community setting on public transportation? A perceived barrier would be that veterans are seen to be handicapped or have some sort of level of disability, or they have PTSD. Yes, veterans, like Heather said, or service members do have PTSD, but not all of them. And we have to understand what their needs are, if they have some sort of medical background to understand what that is. But a lot of veterans are perceived to be handicapped or disabled, so we have to look out for that as well and not discriminate them. Next question. Heather?
Okay, what are some tips, tricks, or tools you find helpful when working with an individual who is in the military or a veteran within the community setting on public transportation? Just going back to knowing your client and knowing if they do or do not have PTSD, all of them, if they've gotten hurt in combat, might have some certain triggers that will set them off and get them upset and not focus on what they're doing. So just learning what the triggers are, whether it be loud noises or crowds, just helping prepare them for situations that they might enter that have those triggers, or if you see them up ahead, helping your client avoid them.
Question 4, what are some safety concerns to be aware of when working with an individual who is in the military or a veteran within the community setting on public transportation? One of the reasons is, why are they receiving travel training? Why are they receiving assistance? Understanding why they're trying to get travel training and go from there. Another reason would be understanding their limitations. If they can't walk that very far, then you're only limited to train them within the vicinity of where they live at. And also having an idea of their medical background. Do they have walking problems? Do they need any assistive devices? That would be fundamental for the training as well. Next question. Do you have a specific example of a training involving an individual who is in the military or a veteran? How is it different than working with a civilian trainee? I have an example when I trained a veteran, and we were conducting an assessment at a local coffee shop. And everywhere that he would go to, he would look for the closest exit. And that was something that was installed in him because when he was overseas, that's what they trained him. You always look for the closest exit, and if there's not a close exit, where are you going to be located? So when we were sitting down at that Starbucks, we sat at the closest exit, and as well when we were on the bus. And those are just things that you have to be aware of. And also ask him, is there anything specific when it comes to the training that you would want to be informed of? And that was very different because a normal civilian, at least I don't know anyone really that would sit next to an exit just because something might happen. You just don't really think of that for the general person. Next slide, please. And this concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And then once again, I am Jessica Perez, and I am the Regional Travel Trainer.
All right, so it looks like we have some time for questions. And once again, thanks to Jessica and Heather. Their contact information is on the screen, so if you have direct questions for them, please feel free to contact them, or you can always direct your questions towards me as well, and Grace at mtm-inc.net. We will use the chat feature for questions, so we'll go ahead and take those at any time. So if you have a question, please direct them to me, Nathan, Grace, in the chat feature. We'll go ahead and we'll have them answered as soon as possible. So we do have one question that is here. So someone did ask, what are some specific triggers that there may be in the community or on public transportation for someone with PTSD?
This is Heather. Some that just come to mind right away are crowds. That's a huge one that I've experienced. And you can't avoid the crowds, obviously, if you're taking public transit. So just really preparing your client for what to expect. You know, this train will be crowded. You know, do you need to sit down? Would you rather stand? Just kind of preparing them as best as you can. Loud noises. It's different noises for different people. I've been around people that it's the horn. You know, so just kind of knowing what sounds. Obviously, if you're in a city traveling, you can't avoid the sounds. So just knowing what they are and being prepared to deal with a situation. Noise is big, crowds. Being in an enclosed space. I know, like riding the subway under the ground, you're not only in an enclosed space, but you can't see out, obviously, because it's dark and you're in a tunnel. So just having conversation and preparing them, if they haven't used public transit, preparing them as much as you can before you even go is really important.
Another trigger might be IEDs, and those are what's used overseas, and those are improvised explosive devices, and those are hidden on roads where there's a lot of trash, and they're hidden on top of, you can't really see them. So if you ever get the chance to Google it, an IED, and I've had several situations where my friends, they're just paranoid to be walking where there's a lot of trash on a sidewalk where you really can't see what's ahead of you. That's a great example of a trigger, as well as what Heather said.
Great, thank you for that. We have another question here that is, what is the best way to get a veteran connected with their local Wounded Warrior or similar program? Once they make an initial phone call, what happens after that?
So the resources that we listed online for each program for each branch, if you go onto their website, it tells you how to get connected with that organization, and that they have people, all of the organizations have staff members that will help connect you with your veteran in their specific community. The resources are so endless, it's hard to navigate by yourself, but if you connect your service member with one of those organizations respective to their branch, someone on those staff have the resources to connect them in their respective community.
Right, and another example would be the VFW, and that stands for Veterans of Foreign Wars. And usually when you're in the process of transitioning out from the military into this civilian life, you get about a week training of, okay, these are the resources you have available once you go out in the community and are ready to live a civilian life. So when you're at least active duty, they'll help you transition out, and they'll provide you with those resources available for you.
Great, thank you. One more we have here, specifically for travel training and public transportation. What are some suggestions of places or things to do for military veterans in the community if they're far away from their families or loved ones? What would you suggest for some things to have them go to or train to?
That's actually a good one, because I myself moved here. My husband got stationed here in Jacksonville, and we have no family. So I was actually out there trying to do what is out there for veterans. And we go to a lot of museums. I train a lot of people that are veterans how to go downtown, the resources. We've gone to an VFW office, and they've actually became a member. Downtown is a great resource. I know where I'm from, downtown is the main location where there's a lot of veteran resources. Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, so it is almost the end of our presentation, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you all for participating today. We hope you can continue to join us in our webinar series this summer. Our next one is on July 29th. It is on people with physical disabilities. It can be the same time, 2 p.m. to 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. And you can find some more information if you need to at www.mtm-inc.net. Also, once again, you can contact Jessica or Heather or myself if you have any questions, concerns that you'd like to have answered in the future or don't want to share right now. But thanks again to Jessica and Heather for the presentation and presenting today. Otherwise, thanks again and have a great day to everybody.